Okay, I'm Pierre Yang. I'm representative of Taiwan to Ireland, and what I like to say is express my gratitude and respect. Especially, I like to pay tribute to the three outstanding translators, because, frankly speaking, it is a very difficult point for me, even in Chinese. So I think it is created for Taiwan, but one of my friends, an invited professor in Dublin from Hong Kong, he insists this poem describes the actual situation of Hong Kong. So it's very interesting. I asked this question to the author, Tsao Yu-po. He's online also, but he didn't like to answer this kind of stupid question. So I like to ask the three outstanding translators this question, because there is a very famous Italian saying, "Traditore, traditore." The translator is the betrayer. Betrayer has no taboos and can say anything he wants. So maybe they can reply my guest question. So I'm looking forward to listen what the guys say. Thank you. Wenqi.
Yes, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the translation slam for the corner around the world. My name is Wenqi Li, a PhD candidate in sinology at the University of Zurich. Today, we are going to discuss translation of Tsao Yu-po's poem, Amnesty of the Night, 夜的大赦. Chow was born in 1994. He received a master's degree in creative writing at Donghua University. In 2017, he won the first prize of Linlong literary competition. He published I Am Afraid of Roof Tiles, 我害怕屋瓦, in 2018, is this book. And his works are much influenced not only by local writers such as Yamu, but also by multiple international writers such as Octavia Paz, Joseph Brodsky, and Seamus Heaney. His works constantly explore the idea of bare life, a term used by Giorgio Agamben to illustrate how an individual can be systematically excluded by any authority. Violence, censorship, suffering, and death are often allegorized in multiple ways to comprehend political ideology and status apparatus. These can be seen as well in the poem we discussed today. And before we discuss the poem and translation, we have an animation of the poem in Mandarin. So, James, please.
夜的大赦。夜晚，一个私密的窃听者，电梯等速上升，交替的监禁与释放。所有的生命都朝向一座玻璃大厦溢去。也许是我深陷其中，借由睡眠、饥饿、睡眠，听夜莺吹响他人的脊椎骨，却没有舍弃作为鸟类的嘀咕。他展开剪刀飞翔，像一位沿街张贴广告的工人。电线杆、铁蒺藜、红砖墙，黑暗再度修复了黑狗的躯体。任他随意为自己镀上黄褐色的眼珠，便是黑猫的诞生。哦，地狱！我眼睛所及，那悲伤是为何物？漆黑的房间寒冷，喝出的每一团白雾化开孔洞，即为幽灵呼告的口气。这不是我认识的人。历史正为他的错误大笑不止，醒来还太早。墙内有人低声哼唱，在暴力的缝隙中 找到缺口，并且在里头活得光亮。木材碳化，濒危的野兽，火鸡，幽灵，一个接一个来过。旋转门，野蛮的中音声。
So this is a wonderful reading, and today in today's discussion of Tsao's poem, we will focus on the three aspects. The first one is the translation of the title into English. The second one is the translation of culture-specific terms into English, and the third one is the links with the poetic tradition of Ireland. The three translations will explain how they perceive this Chinese work, and then express how they translate it, and what is the most difficult part, how to solve the problem, and how to correspond to Irish culture. Now I would like to introduce three translators. The first one is Teng-wei, Tony Yu, studies for master degree in translation and interpretation at National Taiwan University. He is a freelance translator for translation, National Theater and Concert Hall, a Museum of Contemporary Art, Taipei. The second one is Rita Tsao-Yu-po. She also studies for master degree in that translation and interpretation at National Taiwan University after receiving her major degree in English at National Chengchi University. The third one is CHAO Tien-yi, and she's a professor in the Department of Foreign Language and Literatures at National Taiwan University. So today, all the translators are from National Taiwan University, this program. And she was published articles on early modern alchemy and women's literature, Chinese Taoism, and Japanese otaku culture. She is now conducting a study of affectionate male friendship in early modern England and a government-funded research project on mince pies in 17th century English literature. Now I would like to pass the microphone to the first translator, Teng-wei. So Teng-wei, can you please talk about how you translate this work and what is your idea about this work? Thank you.
Thank you, Wen-chi. So before I start, I guess I have to answer the question proposed by Pierre Yang. And when I first read this poem, I can feel a sense of political repression or persecution of state apparatus. But to me, I wouldn't say that the poet is trying to depict a certain event. It's more like a collective event, a collective of human suffering. But actually in this poem, you can see images of that reminds me of the concentration camp, like the 电线杆, the 铁蒺藜, 红砖墙. These are very vivid images of the concentration camp. Yeah. So I will start from here to talk about my choices of the title. So my title is the same as Professor Zhao. It's Amnesty of the Night. So because I think it has a political sense to it, so I choose this word. But I like to point out that if you have the three versions of translation in hand, you can see that Tzu-yun's translation, she chooses Great Pardon, which I believe would be a better choice, because the last line of this poem mentions pardon, which despite of its different religious origin, it echoes with it and gives the whole poem a religious connotation, right? So to translate, I wouldn't say there are many culture-specific terms in this poem, actually, because I think that there are a lot of foreign images in this poem, I've been following Yu-po's writing since 2015, so I have observed that in his poetry collection, he uses less foreign images, but since 2020, you can see that he's posting poetry translation on his Facebook, and it gives his poem some changes. He shifts to more foreign images. So what I did is to use the term in this poem and search in his Facebook post. So what I found is that he has translated Philip Yacott's Night Notes, which Ye Ying is from this poem. And then he translated Charles Simich's Prodigy, and you can find 电线杆 telephone pole in his translation. And then he also translated Simboska's Hunger Camp at Yasso, which you can find barbed wire 铁蒺藜 in this translation. And also By Dark, a poem by Merwin, you can find Black Dog in it. So what I did is I used the original text and put it in my translation, except for the Ye Ying, because Ye Ying's translation is Nighthawk, but in Taiwan, we have a kind of Ye Ying, which is Nanya Ye Ying, or sometimes we call it Ling Ye Ying. And I wanted to give this poem a touch of Taiwanese animal. So I choose to use its name, Svana Nightjar. And I noticed that Professor Zhao also used this nightjar instead of nighthawk. And also Youling, this term has been prevailed in this poem. And Yu-po has also translated Brodsky and Heaney's poems, which they both use a lot of ghosts and phantoms. And I choose phantom to translate Youling because to me, it's phantom has more of a secretness to it. And also I use phantom is because that in the third part of the poem, it can create an imperfect rhyme to it. So that's why I use Youling. Yeah. And finally, I have to say, to be honest, it's difficult to make link with the poetic tradition with Ireland, because we don't see, or I at least I didn't notice a very clear Irish literary tradition in this poem. But if we really want to discuss the poetic tradition between this poem and Irish literature, we can say that there is a very faint connection between Ireland and Taiwan, because as we all know that Yu-po studied at Donghua University, and he is a fan of Heaney and Yang Mu. And as we all know, Yang Mu is the translator of Yeats, which has affected a lot of poets in Taiwan. So this is the one link that I can come up with. Yeah, so that's my part. Thank you.
Professor Lee, could you turn on your microphone?
Sorry, again, I just turned off. Okay, thank you, Tony. And can you now I would like to invite Tzu-yun, Rita, to talk about how you translate this work. Thank you.
Okay. I think unlike Tony, who studied a lot, I can hear from his comment that he had studied greatly at length about the author's works and also about this poem. So, well, I didn't study that much. For me, I just read the poem and I tried to look up different background information for this poem, and the rest is kind of my own interpretation. So I think you can see that my poem is a bit different from the two other translators because I didn't study as hard as the both of them. Yeah. And so and to answer the political question about whether this poem is related to Hong Kong situation, I think that at the time of my translation, I didn't consider it as solely about the political situation. For me, it's I think of it as a more generalized situation. For it can be a poem about a person who feels oppressed, who feels like he's not living exactly like what the speaker wants to be, or he's in a condition where he is in feeling depressed. So for me, my overall approach is for the poem to be a more generalized, in a more generalized direction. And so I chose for it to, well, for me, I wanted it to sound more kind of like a soliloquy of a certain character. Yeah. And for the other parts that I find more difficult are the metaphors that the author used in the poem. Because a lot of times because I think it's also has to do with it being a poem and it has a lot of poetic images in it. So I think for me, the original text is already hard to understand, and I have to translate it into English is, I think, even more hard. It's even harder for me. And so for me, I guess it's some part of it is my own interpretation. And the reason that I try to put Old English into the poem is I guess I just want to add certain layer of depth to it, because for me, my poem doesn't sound poetic. So I just wanted to add what I've read in the past of poetry. And also at that time I was doing my master thesis on Eliot's The Wasteland. And I guess for me, I consider it a good idea to mix Old English and modern English into one text. And I think it has eclectic feel to it. And for me, it's kind of you can have a feel of old culture and new culture. And for me, it's a very interesting kind of feeling that you can give to readers. So that's why I, for the certain parts in the poem, I chose to put in Old English, in the Shakespearean period. And for the cultural specific terms, I guess, I think my approach is kind of what Tony did in his work. I also chose to, I think, to retain just what the author wrote in his original text. I just try to find the direct translations for those words. And yeah, what Tony just said, I also find that there aren't that many cultural specific terms. There are just, I think there are a few of them, but for me, those terms, I think they're what the author like they are the characteristics of the author and the style of the author. And so I would try to keep them as they are as in the original text. That's my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. And now I would like to invite Professor Tsao or Tien-yi, if I may, to express how you translate this work. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm really glad that my microphone and my earphone finally worked. Hi, I'm Tien-yi Chow, and this is my greatest honor to be here and become the 3 winners of the translation contest. And yeah, even I should be proud of my the 2 excellent students from my own university. So for the first question, the title, I know my version is the same as the Chinese version. I didn't really think too much about the sort of the how to get it into a totally new thing. I was just trying to stick to the original Chinese text. So I didn't think too much about the title. I simply just stick to the original Chinese title of that. So it looks okay to me. So I just yeah, let it go. And for the second question, the specific cultural terms, I agree with the other 2 winners. I didn't really feel anything specifically Taiwanese from this poem, and I'm very guilty about not doing enough research on Mr. Tsao and his works, but I did looked for a few articles or reports, news reports about his excellent poetic works. So I got a bit of feeling that many of Mr. Chao's poems are about the social situations or about his own family issues or things like that. So when I was translating the poem, I tried my best to retain the so-called characteristics of the poet. But at the same time, I'm also aware that most of the readers of the translation will be English speakers. So I also try my best to find a few like a parallel text, particularly English poems, and also Irish poems. Should be English poems by Irish poets, because to me, although I'm not a poet myself, I did a few songs. I composed a few like music and with lyrics. I'm amateur music composer. So to me, poetry has much to do with music, melody, the rhythm, and images as well. And also given my background as a otaku of Japanese comics, manga, and anime, when I was reading the poem, I actually find a few very close links to the Japanese sci-fi works. I'm not sure if Mr. Tsao has ever come across with works such as Ghost in the Shell or like Edo Project, Japanese science fiction. But when I was reading the poems, I somehow felt that it was first of all against the so-called authoritarian regime, the suppression of the government, things like that, which is a very popular theme in Japanese sci-fi, especially dystopian sci-fi, and also dystopian English sci-fi as well. So when I was translating the poem, I did my best to put in the images and the words that sort of carrying that kind of feelings. So I'm sorry that I didn't really pay much attention to the local Taiwanese culture, but I hope that I was able to grasp the feelings or the emotions about the sort of this disappointment or the terror sort of brought in by the government, and especially its suppression on the freedom of people. So that's what I was trying to do in my translation. For the terms or the nouns, Well, I have to say that Tony is very he did a lot of work, and I just did my best to Google for the images so that I know the bird is the right kind of bird. So that's what I did to the most. And yeah, so yeah, I feel guilty about that. But for the rest of the terms, especially I pay much attention to the sound. So for example, the line 听夜莺吹响他人的脊椎骨 that really struck me a lot. So I spent quite a lot of time on how to bring up the sound effect of the line. So and for the next stanza 电线杆铁蒺藜红砖墙 when I was reading this line, I was able to recall the very horrific scenes in the movies, sci-fi movies, or dystopian works about especially the much damaged world after the nuclear war, things like that. And we know that Tokyo is one of the destinations where the nuclear bomb just blow up so often for so many times. So for the last question, any cultural links to Irish culture with literature? I think what I could say is when I was trying to find out the parallel text, I read quite a few Irish poems by Irish poets, particularly Seamus Heaney, and I also know that like what Tony just said, Mr. Tsao also translated the poems by Philippa Jacob. So I read a few of her poems, and I was particularly much inspired by Heaney's very famous poem Figures, and that's a poem about the social injustice. So it inspired me a lot. So I sort of try my best to maybe apply as much as possible from Heaney's work. And the other Irish poet that I read a lot is W.B. Yeats. Although he is a little more like an older generation of Irish poets, still I really love his language, and the Second Coming really inspired me a lot. So when I translated the poem by Mr. Tsao, I also try my best to bring a little bit of Yeats in terms of to bring up something mysterious. And finally, in order to make sure that my translation did sound like a poem, I read it aloud for several times. I even tried to maybe try putting some music to that, so that I know at least maybe my translation is not so accurate, at least it sounds like a poem. So I guess that's what I could say about my own translation. And once again, I look forward to learning much more from the winners here and from our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Tien-yi. And before we start our Q&A, I would like to Yu-po to speak a little bit, because he's now going to leave for another meeting. So Yu-po, can you please speak about this yourself, or maybe this point a little bit? And of course, we could translate directly into English if you speak in Chinese. So Yu-po. Hello，玉博。
好，嗨，OK， 谢谢，我还是用中文回答，就是
No worries。
对，谢谢各位阅读我的诗歌。那其实其实这首诗刚好也是在香港那个时期写的。那是否与
So this point is written in when I was in Hong Kong.
对，所以是否可以用香港的事情来解读？我想是可以的。
So if it could possible to translate this word, to interpret this work in the context of Hong Kong.
我也蛮奸诈的，因为这首诗刚好是我下一本诗集的主轴。
So and this work is one of my this work, or the theme of in this work is part of the motif that I would like to illustrate in my next collection.
所以就希望之后如果有机会的话，再给大家阅读我的诗歌。谢谢。
So if I have a chance, and if I have a chance, or if I have your pleasure, that if sorry, my translation is so bad. So I'm very happy to that if you have a chance to read my collection for the next collection. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. 谢谢。
Thank you too. So goodbye, Yu-po. Let's give a
Bye.
farewell.
Nice to meet you.
So
Thank you
nice
very
to
much.
meet you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
See you.
Bye.
Okay,
See
so
you.
let's go back to Q&A, and we have two questions right now. The first one is Barbara. The moment, let's go. I have to go back to the chat box. Barbara, yes. So Barbara says that did you, the translators, type or handwriting your translation draft of the poem? What do your drafts look like? Do they have alternative translation solutions separated by slashes, for example? So anyone would like to answer? Do you type
Shall I go
or
first?
yes, please.
Right. Well, should we go with the order of Tony, Rita, and me? Okay, so I will keep my parts short. All right. And first of all, I didn't really have a handwritten first draft because yeah, it's another guilty thing to say, because when I heard about the news, it was already August. I didn't have much time to go over that, so I did all my work on my laptop. And yes, in my very first draft, it was really rough, and I didn't dare looking back to that. And because I'm not a native translator, I'm not a native speaker of English, my very first draft is like a full of very basic English words. So in the first stage, I try my best to catch the meaning of the original poem. And it was not until the second round of a revision that I focused on the selection of words. So I rely a lot on my thesaurus. So that's my own strategy. And yeah, it's probably not a professional translator should do. But when I translated like a longer text, such as fiction or even like maybe academic papers, I did work with paper and pen. So pen and paper probably, yeah. So depend on the text itself.
And Tony and Rita, do you have any ideas or any feedback?
My approach is just the same as Professor Tsao. But what I did before translating this poem is I put it I put it in a Google Doc, and then I analyze its rhyme. I try to find some rhyme scheme, even though it doesn't really have a specific rhyme scheme, but you can find some internal rhyme. So I mark it out to make sure that when I'm translating, I will try my best to replicate that kind of rhyme or the musicality.
Thank you. And Rita, do you have any ideas?
My approach is also similar to Professor Tien-yi's. Yeah, I think I revised like 3 times. Like, yeah, the first time is just putting down whatever like hits you the first time you look at the poem. And the second time you started doing more revisions. And I think the third time is when you like read it out loud to see if it sounds right and if it sounds musical to me. And yeah, and I think I let it sit for 3 days. Like when I finished my third revision, I let it sit for like 3 days, and then after 3 days I go back and look at it again, and I think it did some slight changes, but not many changes. That's my overall process.
Okay, so and the second question is by Donna, and I think it's she, right? She says, she asks, when translating, how vision is your approach? Is a vision approach more significant than a literal word-for-word application to the original text? Good question. I would say it's really a good question because in Chinese, it's an ideograph. So all about vision, but when translate into English, it would be totally different. So how you guys think about these questions? Vision or literal word for word? Or maybe we could talk about, think about musicality. Think about musical.
Well,
Yes, please.
okay. Yeah, I said earlier that because I was born to be an otaku, I'm more like a visual thinker. So when I was translating the poem, I actually sort of was thinking more in like a visual way. But I'm also aware that because this is the English poem and English language itself has a lot to do with like the hearing bit. So I try my best to combine the two things, the visual part and also the musical part, and the sort of the thing to the sound and voice. So I guess my work is probably a combination of both, but in my brain, it's always like images come first. Maybe I should try writing some poem myself. Yeah.
And how about word for word application to the original text? How do you think about this issue? Because it's quite, I could understand it's quite hard when I try to translate Yu-po's work, maybe. And I notice it's really hard to translate word for word or literary. And how do you think about this? Do you have any idea about this
quite
word of
challenging,
word?
I have to say. I was thinking that when it comes to the like a practical bit, when I was translating the work, I felt a little bit worried about if I was able to interpret the poet's images accurately. I was even attempted to email Mr. Tsao about whether or not I got anything wrong, but I wasn't sure if that's a problem or if that will break the rules. So I didn't dare doing that. But I think when it comes to like for example, translation for like a literary magazine or not, probably it will work if the translator communicates with the original author to find out if the interpretation with the translation would work. So probably the poet will know the better, about the selection of the word. Although for us translators, our job is to being able to be the voice and the mouthpiece of the poet, trying our best to speaking in the poet's voice, but in another language. I know this is always a very demanding job, even for so many years. I know so many generations of lyric translators are doing that are struggling or are like striving to do that. So my personal view is we always do our best to be loyal to the original. But when it comes to aesthetics, when it comes to literature, sometimes we have to make a choice. So it will be maybe more workable if we can double check with the poet, but we just do our best.
And how about Rita and Tony? How do you think about this issue? And or maybe from your experience, do you have any difficulties when to translate some words or some original text, and you have to think about the word for word literary, or think about the visual image and musicality?
I think for me, this poem is quite visual. because I think a lot of the metaphors inside are quite vivid pictures of describing something. So for me, I think when I read the metaphors, I have kind of like an image. And so I think for me, it's image. And then I transform the images into like words or text. So I think for me, when I did this translation, I need to have that image first and then translate them into words. And I think like an example is in the first section of the poem. It's I think the Chinese is 玻璃，所有生命意象，玻璃大象嘛，印象中这样，就是
所有的生命，
所有生命，
我帮你念吗？所有的生命都朝向一座玻璃大厦溢去。
好，玻璃大厦 ，OK， 玻璃大厦 ，Yeah， because I use skyscraper while the two other translators use other words, and for me, I think it's an example because for me, when I pictured this metaphor, I pictured it as a skyscraper. But for the two other translators, probably they didn't picture it that way. So for me, I think that's like how I chose, like for the wordings that I put in this poem has a lot to do with how I pictured the metaphors.
Yes, allow me to interrupt. Yes, the others, I think this is Tien-yi's translation is glassy tower, and Tony's translation is glass edifice, and Rita's is glass skyscraper. So yes, true. There's different kind of image here. Yes, and how? So Tony, what do you think about this?
Well, in this poem, there are a lot of movement and action, which I honestly don't really get it. And so I try to just stick to what I see. Yeah. For example, in the first part, second stanza, the line which Professor Tsao just cited, 听夜莺吹响他人的脊椎骨，却没舍弃作为鸟类的低估。他展开剪刀飞翔，像一位沿街张贴广告的工人。So for me, I've read these two lines several times, and I still don't really know its meaning and what it really wants to express. But you got a very vivid image, so I just stick to the lines and recreate the image so that the English readers or someone who can read English can recreate that visual idea in their minds. And I think in this poem there are many images that the poet just throw to us individually, so you don't really need to interpret it. You just find the equivalent word in English and then put it back. Yeah.
Okay, and we have some other questions, and first is Barbara and Ulysses, but I would like to choose Ulysses first because we have already, it's Barbara's question, sorry, but later we will back to you, Barbara. So Ulysses' question is, where you find specific words that are hard to translate, what is your strategy to translate them? Will it be more closed? Will it be more close the emotion of the words, of the original meaning of the words? Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, I seem to be always the first one to speak. I have to say that
it's good. It's always good.
Like
no worries, it's good.
Priority. All right. Actually, the other two are more professional translators than I am. So yeah, next time you can speak first. I just wanted to say a little bit about the last line. I guess probably I also saw it from the messages earlier, which is the term 中音声. That was really a challenge, big challenge to me. I don't know about the other two winners. Because first of all, it didn't really exist in Western culture. I don't know. I mean, I am really curious about it, like in the audience from other countries. How would you sort of understand the term 中英声? So my strategy is probably not very skillful. I just tried to find out the original meaning of the term, and then I used a little bit exotic word for that. So I didn't really use like a ghost with spirits, because I don't think they are totally the same. I also wanted to draw attention from the readers to the very specific, maybe Chinese or Taiwanese culture of people after they die. So I used a very maybe rare word, which is probably also a translation from Indian language. It's called bardos of savages, bardos. So I really didn't know the word before I checked it online. So that is my attempt to bring the exotic, maybe feeling of the word itself, but at the same time, later I was sort of worried about if the readers haven't really come across words such as bardos, would it cause any trouble in their understanding of the poem? That's my own question. I don't know what the readers think about.
Yes, please, Tony.
Okay, I want to reply that to Professor Zhao's the explanation of bardo, because I think maybe English readers would be more familiar with this term in recent years, because in 2017 or something, an American novelist, George Saunders, published a novel called Lincoln's in the Bardo. So it's actually meaning that he's in limbo, but he chose Bardo. So maybe limbo is a more familiar word for the Western readers, but actually it's a very similar concept. And so I'm guessing that that's because it's also because of that novel that Tsao Yu-po used this word, because in Chinese, I think Chinese translation is 林肯在中音, so it's like just this 中音声, right?
And Rita, what is your idea? How do you find this? Or maybe let's ask a more broad question, for example, like how do you translate Sanskrit? If you have a term like Sanskrit or Buddhist terms, and you have to translate into English, and how do you deal with this trouble? Yes, please, Rita.
Okay, sorry. I think because for this poem, the author, I think they used the words deliberately for, like, I don't know, for his literary creation. So I think it's better to just retain what he wrote in the original text. But I think because different texts have different readers or target audience, so I think you also have to think of like who your target audience is. And because it's this one is a literary work, the target audience, like when they read it, they have to feel, I think they can be allowed to feel like there's something different with this poem. So yeah, so I think for literary works, my approach would be to really stick to the original text of whatever the author put in the original text. We try to retain its authenticity, and for its, like, if it's Sanskrit, then we try to use the Sanskrit as well.
Yeah, I think so as well, actually. Okay, so next question from Barbara. Two questions actually. The first one is, will the translator be reading their poems aloud? And I think some of you already answered. And the second question is, okay, I'm a researcher of the literature. Okay, no, she has no question. Okay, this is another question. Will the translators read their works aloud? Particularly if you translate poems, maybe, or short story. Will you read the works in English or in Chinese if you translate to Chinese? Yes, please.
I think they, like Rita and Professor Tsao, both mentioned that they read out loud, and I did it too. Yeah, before handing in, I read it for like twice or three times. Yeah. And try to.
Right. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just about to say that I saw Barbara's message that she actually wanted all of us to read out our translation here. I guess did I understand that right? Because she wanted us to read out our translation here. Is that what I understand? Yeah, I think that's what she wanted. So are we allowed to do that? To read our translation here. I guess that's what Barbara wanted us to do.
Sorry again, your question. So we are a little bit like distracted. Sorry. We have to think. So what is your question right now, Tien-yi?
Oh, I was just trying to make sure that Barbara's question is that she said in the message that she actually wanted us, the winners, to read out our own translation aloud individually.
I don't think so, right? Actually, yes, actually, I was hoping that would be read for us. So Barbara, are we going to read the works, the translation right now?
Amnesty of the night, an eavesdropper of privacy while the elevator rises at even speed, swapping between imprisoning and release. All livings float towards a glassy tower. Perhaps I was trapped in it through sleep, hunger, and sleep again. I hear nightjars piping up people's spines without abandoning their own bodies cooling. Then they scissor into the air like workers posting others along the street. Pulls, barbed wires, red brick walls. The darkness repairs the black dog's body, letting it plague its eyes with a yellowish brown, hence the birth of a black cat. Oh,
yes,
hell, what exactly is that distress envisioned by my eyes? In the cold dog cell, each white puff with the cut in the middle, turning into a mouthpiece for those cries. This is not who I know. History is scuffling at its errors, still too early to wake up while there's feeble humming from the inside of the wall. Seek breaches through the chinks in my lens and live with light inside. As the firewood is carbonized, the endangered beast is whisper. Ghosts, one after another, pass through the revolving door like borders of savage.
The Great Pardon by Night. The night is an intimate eavesdropper, elevator rising steadily, alternating between imprisonment and release. All life gushes toward a glass skyscraper. Am I a prisoner, perchance? I sleep, starve, sleep, to hear the nightingale warble, awakening the spines of people, yet holding steadfast to the murmur of birds. It took flight in scissored wings, like a bill poster posting the street. utility poles, iron caltrops, red brick walls. Once more darkness gives life to the black hound's body, callously gilding it with topaz eyes, giving birth to the black cat. Oh hell, what's in that sorrow on where my eyes lay? Pitch black chamber, cold as ice. White puffs of smoke slice open hollows with each exhale, to make a confessing mouth part for the phantom ghost. Nay, I know thee not. History cracks up at its own mistakes. Too early to rise, a man croons within the walls. I'm a sinner living on the edge of violence. Gotta find a crack and make glory out of it. Wood carbonized, a beastly dying, death by fire. Phantoms, arriving one after another through the rotating door. A barbaric bardo.
Amnesty of the night. Nighttime, a private eavesdropper. The lift rises at uniform speed, alternately allowing imprisonment and freedom. All living beings flow towards a glass edifice. Perhaps I'm among them. By slumber, hunger, and slumber, I listen to the Svanna nightjar toots the spine of others, yet holds on to its hood. It soars with an open scissor, like a worker posting ads along the street. Telephone pole, barbed wire, red brick wall. Darkness again restores the black dog's body and allows it to glaze itself with twining eyes, creating a black cat. Oh hell, how can the sorrow be seen as far as my eyes touch? Bitter is the black room, and every white mist puffed out is ripping a hole in the air, the phantom's calling mouthpiece. This is not the person I know. History is scuffling at its mistakes. It's too soon to wake up. A voice within the wall hums. Find a gap in the crack of violence, and then live brightly in it. Firewood charred, endangered beast. Fire when silent. The phantoms come one by one through the revolving door, the barbaric bardo.
Thank you. So it's really nice to hear three of you to read your work, and now we feel like there's a kind of difference between musicality, rhyme schemes, and everything. Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe we're going to call it a day, but before that, we'll have still some questions. And I think this is maybe the last one. When the translators from Taiwan Island Association Administrator, when the translator look into the Yoli or Zhong Yinshen spirit or bardo, do they have any visual reflection? For example, transition between life and death, like Tibetan bardos. Yeah, this is really the major problems when we translate this work. So how about yes, please, spirit and bar or phantoms and bardos? Yes, please, Tien-yi.
This is just my personal view. First of all, because Mr. Tsao has already left, we didn't have chance to double check with him if Zhong Yinshen here has got any specific meaning of that. But according to my own understanding of the maybe the customs or the legends, Zhong Yinshen bardos or the limos are slightly different from phantoms and ghosts. Because according to my understanding, it is the stage before the reincarnation, I guess. So after people's death, they will stay in a transitional stage where they stay as a spirit, but it's not forever. So usually that's what we call it as 中阴身. were like bardos were limbos. But for those in sentence, they are sort of it's like not going back to reincarnation. They just keep their like a form of being as a spirit, thing like that. So I guess they are at least slightly different.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit different. Personally, I would say limbo and bardo is quite different context, and limbo is just remind me of divine comedy. So there's some people say they cannot baptized, and they will stay in limbo, not in paradise or in hell, but in limbo. This is what I think. So yeah, it will be a little bit different to, if we translate into limbo, it will be a little bit awkward in a way. Yeah, so Tony and Rita, do you have any ideas?
I think Professor Tsao has made it really clear.
I agree.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that also remind me of the translation of Chinese sci-fi, because I forgot the name of the American translation of Liu Yuquan's Three Bodies. He also addressed this issue because many of Liu Yuquan's sci-fi works have to do with the traditional Chinese religions or like a Chinese god, and for the English translator, it's very demanding job. So it's always a matter of choice. So if it doesn't really have any function, particularly function as like a Zhongying has got specific meaning with specific maybe poetic image, then we could probably choose a more like a popular term for that. But if Zhongying does have a specific meaning to that, maybe we should stick to that.
And any more questions? And or any more ideas from the three translators?
I
Yes,
had a question for Professor Zhao, because yeah, as you said that you have put efforts into making the musicality in this poem, and I also noticed that you didn't stick to the line break of the original text, and I was wondering about your strategy, and also I have a concern that because the original text is not so it doesn't contain that much of musicality or rhyming. So what do you think about that?
Hey, that is a very good question, actually, because I actually had a hard time deciding what kind of format I should put my translation in. Because at the beginning, I was like what you just said. I was thinking that I should stick to the original line structure of the poem. But later, I was becoming more aware of the English readers. So I made a very tough decision that, first of all, I did my best to retain the original meaning of the poem as much as possible. But at the same time, I wanted to make the English translation sound more like an English poem. So I changed the structure, changed the line breaks of that, but the meanings are still there. I didn't change much of the meaning and the wordings. But for the footings, because the rhythm of Chinese poem is definitely different from that of English poem or even Japanese poems. So in that sense, I sort of gave up a little bit of the original Chinese poem structure, and then just putting my translation into more like an English poem. Of course, my decision might not be the best decision, and I sort of also appreciate other different kinds of formats and interpretation in the poem. And actually, only your translation reads very melodic and it also sounds very good to my ears.
Yeah, that's true. When I have a chance to translate into English, I also noticed that I have to break some rules and even change some slides, change some lines, and to make it look more English. And I think it would be really a good choice as well, or a good strategy to make it more English, and not just step by step, just regional, just words to words, but more English. Yes. And any other questions? Yes, please.
Add a very brief point to my own comments earlier, because we are very lucky to have a modern poet who is still here. So I guess what we as translators could do is, if there's any issue about the structure or about the wordings, we could always double check with the great poet, all right, before the publication. So at least he or she would be happy about the translation, not as many adaptations of Japanese novels into anime. Later, the original authors would say, no, I don't want it to look like that. That would be really embarrassing. So if we are going to translate and to introduce more Taiwanese literature into English or other languages, it will always make sense if we can double check the meanings or the structure or the wordings with the original author, just to double check. And yeah.
True, and also sometimes with the editor as well, if I have a chance to publish your work, and then you have to discuss with the editor what kind of works he would like to expect, and what kind of, for example, right now I'm just discussing with the editor from Cigars, and he wants to have some more erotic works, queer erotic works, and then I have to find some works that is related to this issue. So this is also another issue. But anyway, any other questions? No, so maybe let's just call it a day, and thank you very much. The three translators, Donnie, Rita, and Tien-yi, and thank you to James and also Pierre, the Taiwan representative office in Ireland. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day today.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, and this is my great pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot.
Okay, well, I would like to say thank you as well to everybody who's spoken today, and especially also to the audience who've joined us. So we run many of these kinds of events all the year round at the Trinity Center for Literary and Cultural Translation. And so we hope that you'll take this opportunity to have a look at our website and see about future events that will be coming up. I don't think we have any listed right now, but we will be having more in the new year. And we also are quite active on Facebook and Twitter, and also on YouTube. So anyone who might have missed this event can catch up on our YouTube channel. And for anybody who really enjoys translation-based events, we'd be delighted to see you join our Friends of the Trinity Center for Literary and Cultural Translation Friends scheme that brings you closer to us and gives you a whole raft of different benefits as well. So with that said, I hope we'll see you again very soon for a future event. And again, thank you very much for joining us. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for